Buried Giant, Part 2, Chapter 6. For all his tiredness, Axel was finding sleep elusive. The monks had provided them with a room on the upper story, and while it was a relief not to have to contend with the cold seeping up from the soil, he had never slept easily above ground. Even when sheltering in barns or stables, he had often climbed ladders to a restless night, troubled by the cavernous space beneath him. Or perhaps his restlessness tonight had to do with the presence of the birds in the dark above. They were now largely silent, but every so often would come a small rustle or a beating of wings, and he would feel the urge to fling his arms over Beatrice's sleeping form to protect her from the foul feathers drifting down through the air. The birds had been there when they had first entered the chamber earlier in the day, and had he not felt, even then, something malevolent in the way these crows, blackbirds, and wood pigeons looked down on them from the rafters? Or was it just that his memory had become colored by subsequent events? Or perhaps the sleeplessness was on account of the sounds, even now echoing across the monastery grounds, of Wiston chopping firewood. The noise had not prevented Beatrice from sinking easily into sleep, and on the other side of the room, beyond the dark shape he knew to be the table on which they had earlier eaten, Edwin had settled to a gentle snoring. But Wiston, as far as Axel knew, had not slept at all. The warrior had remained sitting over in the far corner, waiting for the last monk to leave the courtyard below, then gone out into the night, and now here he was again, and despite Father Jonas's warning, cutting more firewood. The monks had taken some time to disperse after emerging from their meeting. Several times Axel had come close to sleep, only to be brought to the surface again by voices below. Sometimes there were 4 or 5, always lowered, often filled with anger or fear. There had been no voices now for some time, and yet as he drifted again toward slumber, Axel could not shake the feeling that there were still monks below their window. Not just a few, but dozens of robed figures standing silently around under the moonlight, listening to Wiston's blows resounding across the grounds. Earlier, with the afternoon sun filling the chamber, Axel had looked out of the window to see what happened to what appeared to be the entire community. More than 40 monks, waiting in clusters all around the courtyard. There was also a furtive mood among them, as if they were keen that their words were not overheard, even by those in their own ranks, and Axel could see hostile glances being exchanged. Their habits were all of the same brown cloth, sometimes missing a hood or a sleeve. They seemed anxious to go into the large stone building opposite, but there had been a delay, and their impatience was palpable. Axel had been gazing down on the courtyard for several moments when a noise made him lean further out of the window and look directly beneath him. He had seen then the outer wall of the building, its pale stone revealing yellow hues in the sun, and the staircase cut into the rising from the ground towards him. Midway up these stairs was a monk. Axel could see the top of his head, holding a tray laden with food and a jug of milk. The man was pausing to rebalance the tray, and Axel watched the maneuver with alarm, knowing how these steps were worn unevenly, and that with no rail on the outside, one had always to keep pressed to the wall to be sure not to plunge down onto the hard cobbles. On top of it all, the monk now ascending appeared to have a limp, and yet he calmly kept coming, slowly and steadily. Axel went to the door to relieve the man of the tray, but the monk, Father Brian, as they were soon to learn he was called, insisted on carrying it to the table himself, saying, "You are our guests, so let me serve you as such." Wiston and the boy had left by then, and perhaps the sound of their woodcutting was already ringing through the ear, so it had been just he and Beatrice who sat down, side by side, at the wooden table and devoured gratefully the bread, fruit, and milk. As they did so, Father Brian had chatted happily, sometimes dreamily, about past visitors, the fish to be caught in the nearby streams, a stray dog that had lived with them until its death the previous winter. Sometimes Father Brian, an elderly but sprightly man, got up from the table and shuffled about the room, dragging his bad leg, talking all the while, every now and then going to the window to check on his colleagues below. Meanwhile, above their heads, the birds had been crisscrossing the underside of the roof, their feathers occasionally drifting down to blemish the surface of the milk. Axel had been tempted to chase off these birds, but had refrained in case the monks regarded them with affection. He was taken aback then when rapid footsteps came up the stairs outside, and a large monk with dark beard and a flushed face burst into the room. "Demons!" Demons, he shouted, glaring up at the rafters. I'll see them soak in blood. The newcomer was carrying a straw bag, and he now reached into it, brought out a stone, and hurled it up at the birds. Demons! Foul demons! 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 As the first stone ricocheted down to the ground, he threw a second and then a third. The stones were landing away from the table, but Beatrice had covered her head with both arms, and Axel, rising, began to move towards the bearded man. But Father Brian had reached him first, and clutching both the man's arms, said, Brother Erasmus, I beg you, stop this. Calm yourself. The birds by now were screeching and flying in all directions, and the bearded monk shouted over the commotion, I know them! I know them! Calm yourself, brother. Don't you stop me, Father. They're agents of the devil. They may yet be agents of God, Erasmus. We don't know yet. I know them to be of the devil. Look at their eyes. How can they be of God and gaze at us with such eyes? Erasmus, calm yourself. We have guests present. At these words, the bearded monk became aware of Axel and Beatrice. He stared angrily at them and then said to Father Brian, Why bring guests into the house at a time like this? Why do they come here? They're just good people traveling by, brother, and we're happy to give them hospitality, as is ever our custom. Father Brian, you're a fool to tell strangers of our affairs. Look, they spy on us. They spy on no one, nor do they have any interest in our problems, having plenty of their own, I don't doubt. Suddenly the bearded man drew out another stone and prepared to hurl it, but Father Brian managed to prevent him. Go back down, Erasmus, and let go this bag. Here, leave it with me. It won't do carrying it everywhere the way you do. The bearded man shook off the older monk and clutched his sack jealously to his chest. Father Brian allowed Erasmus this small victory, ushered him to the door, and even as the latter turned to glare again at the roof, pushed him gently out onto the stairway. Go back down, Erasmus. They miss you down there. Go back down and take care you don't fall. When the man had finally gone, Father Brian came back into the room, waving his hands at the feathers floating in the air. My apologies to you both. He's a good man, but this way of life no longer suits him. Please be seated and finish your meal in peace. And yet, Father, Beatrice said, that fellow may be right when he says we intrude on you at an uneasy time. We've no desire to increase your burdens here, and if you'll only let us quickly consult Father Jonas, whose wisdom is well known, we'll be on our way. Is there any word yet if we might see him? Father Brian shook his head. As I told you earlier, mistress, Jonas has been unwell, and the abbot's given strict orders of no one will disturb him other than with permission given to him by the abbot himself. Knowing of your desire to meet with Jonas and the pains you have made to come here, I've been trying since your arrival to attract the abbot's ear. Yet as you see, you come at a busy time, and now there's a visitor of some importance arriving for the abbot, delaying our conference further. The abbot's even now gone back to his study to talk with the visitor while the rest of us wait for him. Beatrice had been standing at the window to watch the bearded monk's departure down the stone steps, and she now pointed, saying, Good Father, isn't that the abbot returning now? Axel, coming to her side, saw a gaunt figure striding with authority into the center of the courtyard. The monks, breaking from their conversations, were all moving towards him. Ah, yes, there's the abbot returned. Now finish your meal in peace, and regarding Jonas, be patient, for I fear I'll not be able to bring you to the abbot's decision until after this conference is over. Yes, I'll not forget, I promise, and I will petition well for you. It was surely the case that then, as now, the warriors' axe blows had been ringing across the courtyard. In fact, Axel could distinctly recall asking himself, as he watched the monks filing into the building opposite, if he was hearing one woodcutter or two. For a second blow would follow so close behind the first, it was hard to tell if it was a real sound or an echo. Thinking about it now, lying in the dark, Axel was sure that Edwin had been chopping alongside Wiston, matching the warrior blow for blow. In all likelihood, the boy was already an expert woodcutter. Earlier that day, before they had come to this monastery, he had astonished them by digging so rapidly with 2 flat stones he had happened to find nearby. Axel by then had ceased to dig, having been persuaded by the warrior to preserve his strength for the climb to the monastery. So he had stood beside the oozing body of the soldier, guarding it from the birds gathering in the branches. Wiston, Axel recalled, had been using the dead man's sword to dig the grave, remarking that he was reluctant to blunt his own on such a task. Sir Gawain, however, had said, "This soldier died honorably, no matter the schemes of his master, and a knight's sword is put to good use giving him a grave." Both men, though, had paused to watch in wonder the progress being made by Edwin with his rudimentary tools. Then, as they resumed their work, Wiston had said, "I fear, Sir Gawain, Lord Brindis will not believe such a story." "He'll believe it well enough, sir," Gawain had replied, continuing to dig. "There's a coolness between us, but he has me for an honest fool, without the wit to invent devious tales. I may tell them how the soldier spoke of bandits, even as he bled to death in my arms. Some will think it a grave sin to tell such a lie, yet I know God will look mercifully on it, for isn't it to stop further bloodshed? I'll make Brindis believe me, sir. Even so, you remain in danger, and have good reason to hurry home." "I'll do so without delay, Sir Gawain, as soon as my errand here is finished. If my mare's foot isn't soon healed, I may even trade her for another, for that's a long ride to the fens. Yet I'll be sorry, for she's a rare mare." "A rare one indeed. My horse, alas, no longer possesses such agility, yet he comes to me in many an hour of need, as your mare came to you just now. A rare horse, and one you'll be sad to lose. Even so, speed is crucial, so be on your way, and never mind your errand. Horace and I will see to the she-dragon, so you've no cause to think further of her. In any case, now I've had time to dwell on it, I see Lord Brindis can never succeed in recruiting Carrig into his army. She's the most wild, untamable of creatures, and will as quickly spew fire on her own ranks as on Brindis's foes. The whole idea is outlandish, sir. Think no more of it, and hurry home before your enemies corner you." Then, when Wiston continued to dig without responding, Sir Gawain asked, "Do I have your word on it, Master Wiston?" "On what, Sir Gawain?" "That you'll think no more of the she-dragon and hurry home. You seem keen to hear me say so." "I think not just of your safety, sir, but of those on whom Carrig will turn should you arouse her. And what of these companions who travel with you?" "It's true, the safety of these friends gives me concern. I'll go beside them as far as the monastery, for I can hardly leave them defenseless in these wild roads. Thereafter it may be best that we part." "So after the monastery you'll make your way home?" "I'll set off home when I'm ready, Sir Knight." The smell rising from the dead man's innards had obliged Axel to take a few steps away, and when he did so he found he had a better view of Sir Gawain. The knight was now waist-deep in the ground, and the perspiration had drenched his forehead, so perhaps that was why his expression had lost its customary benevolence. He was regarding Wiston with intense hostility, while the latter, oblivious, carried on digging. Beatrice had been upset by the soldier's death. As the grave had grown deeper, she had walked slowly back to the great oak, and seated herself again in its shade, her head bowed. Axel had wanted to go and sit with her, and but for the gathering crows would have done so. Now, lying in the darkness, he too began to feel a sadness for the slain man. He remembered the soldier's courtesy towards them on the little bridge, and the gentle way he had spoken to Beatrice. Axel recalled too the precise way he had positioned his horse when first entering the clearing. Something in the way he had done so had tugged on his memory at the time, and now in the night stillness Axel remembered the rise and fall of moorland, the brooding sky, and the flock of sheep coming through the heather. He had been on horseback, and in front of him was mounted his companion, a man called Harvey, the smell of whose heavy body overpowered that of their horses. They had halted in the midst of the windswept wilderness because they had spotted movement in the distance, and once it was clear it signified no threat, Axel had stretched his arms. They had been riding for a long time and watched the tail of Harvey's horse swinging from side to side as though to prevent the flies settling on its rear. Although his companion's face was hidden from him at that moment, the shape of Harvey's back, indeed his whole posture, announced the malevolence aroused by the sight of the approaching party. Gazing past Harvey, Axel could now make out the dark dots that were the sheep's faces, and moving among them 4 men, one on a donkey, the others on foot. There appeared to be no dogs. The shepherds, Axel supposed, must have long ago spotted them. two riders clearly outlined against the sky, but if they had felt apprehension, there was no sign of it in their slow, relentless trudge forwards. There was, in any case, just the one long path across the moor, and Axel supposed the shepherds could avoid them only by turning back.